everyone, it's Camille Wimbish and Catherine Terser.
Hi, everybody.
We are going to be getting started in just a minute or two. We had 100 people who registered for the webinar, and so it looks like only 38 of you are on so far. So we'll just give it just a minute or two before we get started. If you have questions or if you can't hear me, could you just chat me? I imagine we may be getting lots of questions for the presentation, and the best way to handle it is probably just going to have for people to wait till the end to ask their questions. A lot of the questions we've encountered during our in-person trainings are answered as we go through the slides. So either make a note and jot it down, or you can chat the question in the box, and we will take a look at all the chat questions at the end.
And the chat box is where it says type message?
Yeah, this chat.
Oh, I see what you're talking about.
Could someone chat me a message to let me know that you guys are out there?
Oh, I can call in. Sure. I don't know what happened. Is anyone chatting you to say you're ready?
No.
Okay.
Hi, I'm just sending a message to see if you can hear me. I know it said that people are in listen-only mode, so it may be hard for you to speak up, but if you want to chat me or somehow send a bat signal, that would be appreciated.
Can you take them off mute?
I think so. Yes, I can hear you. Great. Thank you for responding.
Okay. And we've hit about 6:02. How many people do we actually have?
This says, so it's hard for me to see this. It says the chat is kind of hidden. Tell people to look to the right of their screens for a little bar. And actually, I think I accidentally exited out of the chat button myself. So
Okay.
let me find it. Bear with me. I'm sorry. Someone says, I can hear you and I'm here. Great. Yeah, the question, I don't know why it shows, instead of as a chat, it showed up in the questions bar. So we're trying to find a way to make this bigger so we can see your questions.
Oh, there we go.
There, that's much better. Now, where did the chat button go? It was down here. Just bear with us one more minute. There.
All right.
Okay, I think we've got it.
Yeah, we've hit 6:03, so this is actually a good point. We want to be mindful of your time. Welcome, everybody. This is Catherine Terser from Common Cause Ohio, and I am here with Camille Wimbish, who's with Ohio Voice, or the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition. We're pleased to have you here to talk about how we're planning to do the election protection program this year. This, of course, is a very important, is this very important project, and we have a few goals to go through for this webinar. The first goal is to just understand basically the overall structure. How does election protection actually work? Then to go over what happens with a poll monitor. What are the actual expectations? What is your role? And then we're going to go over some of the frequently asked questions and make sure that you have the kind of information that will be helpful for you on election day so that you can be successful. And then finally, we're going to go over some basics of Ohio election law. For some of you, you're very familiar with this, but it's useful to just go over some of the basics just so we all remember. All right, so we're already at the structure of election protection. So, one of the things that really is exciting about the election protection program is the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law is the partner that organizes the election protection hotline. And in 2012, they received over 125,000 calls the day before and the day of election. And so, there are all sorts of different calls. Sometimes people are calling to find out what their polling location is. Sometimes they're sharing problems. But this is a very important part of our program. The other part really is the poll monitor program. So now last time, I should say 4 years ago, we had poll monitor programs in 22 states. And this year it's expanded greatly. And so this is a wonderful partnership of wonderful legal experts. Some of you are out there as legal experts, and some are voter advocates. And so we're glad that you're here. So at the Hotline Center, which Camille and I spend much of our day at because the Ohio calls are actually answered right here in Columbus, Ohio, over at SEIU in the basement. So we answer Ohioans' calls. We started doing that in early vote. And so they're the people that are working to collect information and figure out how to address problems and work with the boards of elections. And then there are the poll monitors who are out there, and they're the eyes and the ears on the ground. So now there are different hotlines. So, English, of course, 866-OUR-VOTE, but we also have it in Spanish and Asian languages, and we have a new one, which is not on the slide. I wish I'd included it, which is Arab language, which I think is quite exciting. Now, we have programs. I mentioned the number of states that are doing this, but the other thing to think about is there are programs that are in major cities. This is the first year that we have folks that are doing some poll monitoring in rural areas. And so if you are out there in a rural area, thank you so much for joining us. This is an especially important year to actually have a poll monitoring program. Okay, so this is the part where we talk about what is it you do as a poll monitor.
What do you do, Catherine? Please tell me.
So I myself like to think about being a poll monitor as being somebody who welcomes people to the polls. One of the first things that you probably wondered about is, well, wait a second. You told me that I'm going to be a poll monitor. What about my assignments? So now for each of you, you will have a regional lead who will give you a specific location. You might say, well, how do you pick these locations? Generally speaking, they're places where they've had some problems, sometimes long lines, sometimes an overuse of provisional ballots. What are some other problems that you can think of, Camille?
Just poll workers who've given out bad information routinely. We also pick precincts that may have polling places that have a large number of precincts that are voting inside them, and so just given the volume, we know that there will be large numbers of voters who may need assistance. We also pick polling places that are in predominantly African American communities or predominantly Spanish-speaking communities, and polling places where there are a high amount of low-income people, people who are young voters. All of these classes of voters tend to have more difficulty with voting. They may have difficulty with having ID. They may move more often and therefore need more assistance with provisional ballots or finding their correct polling location. So we've got a number of reasons and ways that we can help identify polling locations. And not to worry, we will get them to you after the webinar, so we will definitely have a place to send you. So I know that's usually people's top concern.
Yes,
Where am I going?
Where are you going?
I want to
Yes.
do this, but I need to know where I'm going. So we can work with you to identify where you should go.
All right, so one of the things that it says here is arrive on time. For many of you, you've chosen to do a morning shift or a midday shift or an afternoon shift. Now, we tend to be pretty flexible about that. You know, if you're able to only put in a couple hours, we are so happy to have you, and we'll work with that. So, you know, don't ever feel like, oh, I can't do a full 4 hours or a full 3 hours. You know, we are happy to have you at the polls when you are available. The one thing I would say about when you first arrive, it's important to actually go in and tell the poll workers that you are out there and that you're a nonpartisan volunteer. So we do not have a food budget, but sometimes it's helpful to bring them some food, some donuts or some cookies, sometimes some coffee, whatever it is, just to say, hi, you know, I'm out here, I'm a nonpartisan volunteer, I'm going to be helping voters, and I'm also here if there's anything that you need or anything that you're worried about. And so they may say, you know, they may have questions or want information the same way a voter would. So letting them know that you're out there so that they understand that. So what does out there actually mean? So there's an area where there's a buffer between where voters are completely protected and the entrance to the polling location. And so generally it's marked with flags. Sometimes there's actually something on the ground. If you go to early vote, sometimes you'll notice there's all the way around. There'll be a circumference. And the biggest goal is to just say hi, and the job really is to interact with voters, make them feel comfortable, hand out the Know Your Rights cards, and to have them have a sense that this is a welcoming place that wants them to come and engage in the process. You know, on election day, you know, we are all in this democracy together, and this is a wonderful opportunity to assist voters and to actually pay attention and to report problems. So I think the first thing to think about is, well, what is it that, you know, how are you assisting? Well, of course, when I mentioned the Know Your Rights cards, these are things that you'll be handing out that explain a little bit about, well, what is voter identification? What are some frequently asked questions? A typical question that a voter might have is, I made a mistake. Well, you're actually, you know, you can have 2 more ballots, for example, if you've actually made a mistake. How do you, you know, address that before you actually cast that ballot? There's some choices in there. And so letting voters have that information is really important. The other thing is there are people that will just show up at a polling location and they want to actually know it's theirs, and they want to confirm that they, oh, this is where I went last time, but is it actually, am I at the right place? Because those things, of course, move around. All right, so I think, you know, I think the biggest tip of this is just to really ask people how they're doing. You know, tell them that you are here as a nonpartisan volunteer and that you really want to help them, and ask if they have any questions about voting. And sometimes they'll ask you questions. What do I need for ID? And engaging them in a conversation is a way to make them feel comfortable if they don't actually know something. You know, a lot of times if you just are very friendly, it's helpful for them to say, oh, yeah, you know what, I'll ask a question. I had that question, but I was kind of keeping it to myself, but I'm going to feel comfortable actually making the ask. Okay, now the next part isn't just, you know, it's funny, for any of you who are of a certain age like I am, you will know, you remember Julie McCoy Cruise Director? From the Love Boat. So the Julie McCoy Cruise Director is a way to think about being a poll monitor. You're welcoming people to the polls and saying hello. The next part is to think about being the person who's there to identify problems and to try to figure out what to do. And so the most important thing to remember at the end of the day is call 866-R-VOTE if you don't know what to do. Call your local command person so that if you have a command center, if you are in a major area and you have a command center, a local contact, call them. Call 866-R-VOTE. But for non-urgent issues, you take the paper form and you fill it out. And at the end of the day, what you'll do is you'll scan it. So what are the kind of things that will end up on those forms? Camille, what do we put on those forms?
Oh, gee, you may put on a form, you may say, these are the routine forms, like,
Yes.
hey, I helped a voter find their polling place. Check mark. Hey, I've helped a voter confirm their registration. You would just put a check mark. You wouldn't need to call us in the command center and let us know all the great deeds that you've done in helping voters. You would only need to call us in the command center and report a problem that is going to be affecting multiple voters, and it's something that you can't help a voter with right there in the field.
So an example of this might be a voter goes in, they have their Ohio driver's license, and it does not have the current address or the address where they vote at. And so the poll worker is confused and thinks it has to be the address that they are registered at, and says, oh no, that's not sufficient ID, and says, hey, you have to cast a provisional ballot. Now, if the poll worker is confused about that, because of course in Ohio you can use your driver's license, and since we update it every 4 years, it can have your old address on it. We need to rectify that as soon as possible. So if that's something, as people are leaving and they've cast provisional ballots, so that's the other thing, you're greeting them, and as they're leaving, you're saying, oh, well, I'm so glad you came to vote today. Did you have any problems? How'd it go? That kind of thing. If you hear that there's that kind of situation where a poll worker doesn't have correct information, it's important to call your regional lead or 866-R-VOTE, and we will get in touch with the Board of Election officials so that they can connect with these workers at the polls to try to straighten this out. So, why is all this data important? It basically helps us understand what's happening, what to expect, and how to help in upcoming elections. So we try to capture as much data as possible. And so when you look at that form, you're like, oh, this is, I'm making a bunch of tick marks, but what's it all about? It's all about understanding what happened this election so we can plan well for next election. So this is what I'm talking about, the tallies. So, every time you talk to a voter, just making a little hash mark. The intake form, is included, and this one includes information if somebody has a problem. So you'll be, doing things like if somebody talked to me about their ID, hash mark. If somebody says, hey, I went in and I felt uncomfortable, or they challenged my signature, or any number of things that voters might come out, they look unhappy or they tell you something went wrong, that you write that down, ask if it's okay if we follow up with them, because we want to be able to advocate for other voters in the future, but also for that voter. All right, so minimum information. So when you take that form, the minimum information is making sure that you put in where it is that you are. And then anything that you think that we need to follow up on. Now, we included this slide to remind you of what happened in 2012 when these signs were put up. Voter fraud is a felony. They were put up. Where were they, Camille?
Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus. They're also in other states like Wisconsin. They were clearly designed to intimidate voters and make people feel as though if they even had a hint of a criminal background, that perhaps they'd be better off staying at home and not voting. So we're able to get those billboards removed, but these neighborhoods went up in clearly, urban areas. And so it's important for us, as we're hearing information from you guys that are in the field, if you're collecting information from voters and you think that race plays an important role, it's really good and important that you ask if it's okay that you share their racial information, because it helps to inform where the problems are happening and why perhaps they may be happening.
And that can feel awkward, of course, but it's only if the person, the voter, believes it's connected to the situation they're in. Because a lot of times it's just not, that's not the issue, it's something else. One of the things that we do want to highlight to all of you is that folks that are not currently in prison are permitted to vote. And so there's a lot of misinformation that's out there, and we want as much as possible to invite people into the process. And in Ohio, we actually have some really good rules for inviting people into the process. We're one of those states where if you have not if you've committed a felony and you're out on paper or you're in a halfway house, you can in fact vote, and you can participate like every other citizen of Ohio.
Now, the only hang up is you have to be registered in order for it to count.
That's true.
So we always have to try to get the word out. Unfortunately, we get some calls to the hotline after the voter registration deadline, and we're like, oh, I can vote. That's great. It's a little too late after the deadline. But if you can spread the word starting now, it's always helpful. And anyone can vote with a provisional ballot. So there's always that too.
All right, so I talked a little bit about bringing donuts to the poll workers, but the most important things to do are make sure that you're easily identified. So there's election protection T-shirts or a button. We also encourage you to bring the information that's called top issues in the field, and it includes things like voter identification, what are the hours, what do people that are filling provisional ballots, what are the kind of details that need to be really specifically filled in, and kind of frequently asked questions. We also think that those are good to have with you out in the field. We suggest a phone, clearly comfortable clothing. So some years, Election Day is pretty brutally cold. Sometimes it's almost summery, right?
Yeah.
So just making sure you're comfortable, that you have a granola bar snack, water, comfortable shoes, of course. But the other thing is, I'll bring a yard chair, lawn chair. You could be standing there for quite a while, and it'll be busy for a little while, and it'll be quiet. It's nice to have an opportunity to sit down in something comfortable. And make yourself at home, and that way it won't make quite as long a day. You want to take those intake forms, the ones where you put your information on, and then just make sure you have pen, paper, make sure that all works.
And for those of you who may be wondering, I haven't seen this intake form, or I haven't seen the top issues or FAQs, we will be sending you a packet of paperwork of all this essential information, so not to worry, you'll have it in plenty of time to review it before you're shipped on Tuesday.
All right, so these are the most important things to remember. All right, I have a problem. Who am I going to call? Call your regional lead, call 866-OUR-VOTE. The other thing to remember is that we are nonpartisan. We are really here to help all voters. Now, some of these voters are going to think very differently than you do, and because they just voted, they're going to be really excited, and they may say, what are the kinds of things that you've heard when you've worked the polls?
Oh, I can tell you, people are calling the hotline and say, yeah, we got to get a woman in the White House. And they say, thank you for voting. It's so great that you got your ballot counted. Election night should be a fun night to watch to see what the results are. You can find ways to answer things. Someone might, have all kinds of election commentary that they want to pass on because they're excited about who they voted for. But, and they may even offer, well, who did you vote for? And that's something that you wouldn't want to disclose. You would just say, well, the important thing is that I voted. And that it's not about me. It's about everybody else who's voting in this democracy. And thank you. And try to keep it at that.
And I often say, oh, we're nonpartisan. We just we really want all voters to have access to the polls, and we're just really glad you're out here today. Sometimes the one on the hotline that often works for me is, I'm so glad the election's coming up so quickly. So for many of us, we're really glad. How's this? This is a cycle. We're just really glad. And so the other thing for those of you who are attorneys, it's important to not, you're a trained volunteer, and don't look at the voter as a client. You are a trained volunteer and a voter, a fellow voter who's working to help other voters. Also, the whole notion of being polite, this sounds really obvious, and yet one of the things that we worry about, I'm sure that you've heard things being said about rigged elections and all sorts of things about this election. It's been very, very contentious. And so the goal is to focus on the voter, get the voter information, to encourage folks to move along, but as much as possible not to get yourself involved in an argument. Okay, so we mentioned there were some resources. I think the top issues and the frequently asked questions are the most useful to understand election law. It's kind of typically asked questions. This site, this gettothepolls.com, is really good because all you need is someone's address to get them to the polls. This is particularly important this year. I'm sure that you heard that there were folks that are infrequent voters and that were removed from the polls inappropriately by our Secretary of State. These folks, in fact, have the right to cast a provisional ballot. They're not going to be somebody that you can look up and find them as registered voters. So what you do is you find their polling location based on their address and encourage them to go in. And every voter is given the chance of casting a provisional vote. These voters that have been inappropriately purged will cast a provisional vote also. And it's a way of getting them re-engaged in the system and moving on. And they can have moved since they were removed, if that makes sense. So no worries that way. So let's see, top resources. So it is very useful to have what we call our command center. So your regional leads provide resources because they'll have connections to the Board of Elections folks in your areas. All right, last but not least, if we say this a lot, but at the end of the day, eyes, ears, welcome, and there's a problem, 866, our vote. So you can look up registrations. Camille created this bitdo/SOS lookup, remembering that some of the folks who may cast ballots that will be counted will have been purged, and that's why the gettothepolls.com is really useful for finding a polling location. All right, Camille, I'm going to ask you a little bit about what you see the top issues as being.
Well, certainly people want to know what time do I vote. They may be unclear about the start time, which is 6:30, and the end time, which is 7:30. And the important thing to note about the end time is anybody who is in line by 7:30 p.m. must be allowed to vote. So actually the Board of Elections will say close the polls at 7:30, and they should have someone who gets at the end of the line so that no one can get behind them and vote after 7:30. What ID do I need to bring, Catherine?
Well, you can always use a driver's license, but you can also use a utility bill.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yes, and that utility bill has to be in the past year. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that, in fact, there are things that you might think would work as identification, like a passport, a
student ID,
a birth certificate, that in fact you cannot use. So those are things that are that are on these top issue forms and are under frequently asked questions. The other thing is a lot of people come in and they want to assist their mother. Sometimes this is a mother who's got ill health. Sometimes it's a matter of mother speaks another language and wants some assistance. What are the rules on assistance, Camille?
Well, you can assist your mom. Basically, a person can bring another person of their choice if they'd like assistance into the voting booth, as long as it's not their employer or their union rep. So most anyone can have assistance. And then
the other thing is that that happens a lot. It's kind of crazy how often we move. For many of us, we've lived in the same home for a while. And it surprises us how often Ohioans move. And so there will be many people that say, oh, this is my old polling location. Can I vote here?
No, you can't. Sorry. You need to find your new address because it's actually a felony to vote from your former address.
So we go to gettothepolls.com to find the new location, and you direct them to that location to cast their ballot. All right, so frequently asked questions. Okay, there is a broken voting machine in my polling location. What should I do?
Well, that sounds like a problem. I think you should call the command center.
I think maybe you should. So one of the things that happens is if there is a problem with a broken machine, for example, at a polling location, we'll work with the Board of Elections to send someone out to address that. We'll also make sure that paper ballots are given. If in fact, there's a broken machine, there is always a backup system. But sometimes, you're talking about people who are putting a really, really long day. They do, generally only two times a year where they're being poll workers, and it's easy to get flustered when it's not something that you do on a regular basis. We don't need to have a lot of patience with poll workers because, of course, it's a hard job. So any question here that you wanted to throw out or information you want to throw out?
I just wanted to note, so people who've requested an absentee ballot, you may encounter a few folks who want to show up at their polling place to return their absentee ballot there. And you're not actually allowed to return it, as crazy as it sounds. You have to take it to the Board of Elections. Now that may be a problem if it's, for instance, 7 o'clock, or maybe the person says, oh, I have to go to work. There's no way I can get back to my polling place on time, or there's no way I can get back to the Board of Elections in the opposite direction. So in that case, the first thing, of course, is to encourage them to go to the Board of Elections to return it so they can have that absentee ballot counted as a regular ballot. If it's impossible or it's too late and you're running out of time, you can have them vote on Election Day at the correct polling location. They'll be voting a provisional ballot.
And why do they have to vote a provisional ballot?
Because they want to make sure that they're not double voting or going then and putting the absentee ballot in the mail or doing something else with the absentee ballot that may count.
And so this kind of rule works also for somebody who requested a vote by mail application. They never received a ballot. It just didn't come. They can, in fact, vote on Election Day at their polling location. They just need to cast a provisional ballot. And we do know that that's something that's been happening in Ohio, that up kind of, especially northwest Ohio, a bunch of ballots have not gotten where they needed to go. And so that may be a kind of typical problem to be looking out for, where people are worried, well, wait a second, I was supposed to vote by mail. Will I get in trouble? I don't want to get in trouble because people will, is it double voting? Like, what does this mean? No, well, that's the reason why you cast a provisional ballot. It's set aside so they can confirm that you did not cast one by mail.
So the poll worker will be able to tell if someone requested an absentee ballot because there will be an A in the poll book by the person's name. And so that's how they will check on that. So if someone is upset and said they never got it, they can always call you. We call the command center. We can call the Board of Elections to verify that, in fact, an absentee ballot was sent to them. But essentially, they're going to be asked to vote provisionally.
All right, so this is basically a list of the reasons why you would want to call your command center. Broken machines, poll workers giving wrong information, clearly intimidation of any type. Anytime that you see people leaving, so basically when you cast a provisional ballot, the poll workers will give a piece of paper that provides instructions for kind of next steps. If there's any possible follow-up, it also allows that voter to check to see if their vote actually was counted. So if you're seeing a high number of people leaving with pieces of paper when they went in just to vote, you will know that there have been a high number of provisional ballots, which can suggest a problem. What kind of problems, Camille?
It could suggest that, for instance, the poll workers have panicked and they've decided that they've run out of paper ballots or the voting machines are broken and they don't know what to do. And instead of giving them backup paper ballots, which are regular ballots, every polling place should have a stack of regular ballots that they should be able to use in the event that there are voting machine breakdowns. So they may mistake those and give out provisional ballots by mistake. And that, of course, is not the correct thing to do because provisional ballots are treated differently than regular ballots. Provisional ballots are cast because there's a question about the voter's eligibility to vote. And so the Board of Elections will review those ballots, and they cannot start reviewing them until at least 11 days after the election. So those ballots will not count right on election day in the unofficial tally. So it's really important to try to limit the use of provisional ballots by poll workers when we can get to the bottom of it. And another instance I can think of is, again, we talked about it, a poll worker may say, no, you don't have acceptable ID, you don't have the right ID, and they would give out a provisional ballot. Sometimes poll workers can get confused and say, oh, you don't have a driver's license, and forget about the other list of ID that's accepted, and may just say, go vote provisionally.
So one of the things to highlight, to be on the lookout for, especially you're there at the beginning of the day, is, oh, wait a second, they're not actually opening up at 6:30. What's going on? And this is something where you want to quickly call your regional command center, because this is a problem in which the Board of Elections needs to be alerted to. And a lot of times, the poll workers, they're running around, they're trying to get everything up. They've run into a problem, for example, with the machines, perhaps with the poll books, and they're running a little bit late, but the Board of Elections needs to know that so that they can bring extra assistance and get things going on time. Much like all of our lives, if you get behind a little bit at the beginning of the day, the rest of the day doesn't necessarily go that smoothly. Now, of course, having them close early is also a problem to be alert to, and this can happen, hey, you know what? Nobody's come for a little while. It takes a long time to shut all this stuff down.
Can't we just shut down a machine or two, 3?
Let's get out of here.
Yeah.
It's been a long day. So this is another thing to really be watching for. At the end of the day, those voters deserve those full hours. And even that thing of being in line at 7:30, that doesn't mean that you're going to vote at 7:30. You'd be voting at 8 or 10 or however long it would actually take. And so it's important to have those hours that all Ohioans that are available for all Ohioans. That's just really important. So now, the other thing that I always think that we should look for is the place actually handicap accessible? Now, they're supposed to be. You all know ADA compliance, the Americans with Disabilities Act is quite old at this point. There's no reason why a polling location would not be accessible to all, but things do happen, and sometimes they don't have enough locations, and it's worth noting whether they're not accessible, and if they're not accessible, if they're providing curb service, because they can in fact go out to the car and have the voter cast a ballot, actually much like McDonald's drive-through, doing a drive-through kind of voting. But of course, if they are just, oh, we're just not accessible, and they're not providing that option, that is going to be a serious problem for voters that have special needs. All right. Also, you want to be noticing if there are voters who don't speak English as their first language. If they are having significant problems, you do need to place a call, and we'll see what we can do to round up somebody to be a help. All right. So this is been a really difficult year. One of the things we know about this cycle is that the top of the ticket, both candidates, of course, are urging the American voters to support them, but things have gotten very, very, very contentious. And we also know that one of the candidates has suggested that there's a rigged election, and in fact is organizing supporters to actually go to the polls and watch for voter fraud, to ferret out voter fraud. So we don't expect that you're going to actually have problems on election day, but it is possible that people may be there to intimidate others. And so we wanted to provide some tips. Camille, anything you wanted to add?
I think hopefully a lot of this is just talk. I know we were worried about this in 2012, and it turns out it was a relatively peaceful day. We certainly had, election administration issues to deal with here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of voters feeling unsafe or reports of any sort of widespread intimidation, it just didn't happen. And so we're hopeful that the American spirit will prevail on Election Day and everyone will exercise their voting rights in a peaceful manner. But in the event that you do see something that's troubling, any type of harassment or intimidation, We've spoken to the boards of elections and the election officials about what they suggest, because they certainly are worrying about the same issues.
So, and I really hope that, it's easy to talk smack and say all sorts of things on social media or in a crowd where, you're feeding off each other's energy. I am very hopeful that folks will think twice and be very careful and think about what it means to actually be a voter on election day. We're all equal on election day, and it's important to give folks the space that they actually need to cast a ballot. Now, that being said, we wanted to give you some suggestions for things to do. The first, of course, is not to panic. If you see something that is problematic, for example, we're an open carry state, and you see somebody who has a gun, I'm just giving an example, or you see somebody who's, squinting his eyes and looking at people, and if you see something that you think, hey, this is odd enough, I'm actually going to do something about this. The first thing that I would do is get the voter inside, just encourage voters to keep on moving and get inside. I would let the voting location manager know what's going on. So basically ask the poll worker, to direct you to the voting location manager and tell that person exactly what you saw, as clearly and calmly as you possibly can. And then when you're done explaining what happened there, give a phone call to 866-OUR-VOTE so that you can let them know exactly what is happening on the ground. Now, of course, if you are in danger, the goal is to call 911, get out of Dodge as fast as possible, and if it's safe, to contact the voting location manager.
Yeah, so I had a training last night in Cincinnati, and somebody who was had said, they've worked with the polls many years, and they said their first instinct, if they saw anything, intimidating, would be to call the police. But because, she was persuaded by several people saying, well, then the next thing you know, they'll send 1 police car, 2 police cars, 3 police cars, 4 police cars. The news cameras are going to show up, and it's going to become a circus atmosphere that may actually send a message to people. You know what? You should just stay home. It's just too much trouble. It's too much at risk. When the alternative could be, tell the voting location manager who's trained and equipped to deal with this discreetly and quickly and to effectively resolve the problem.
And one of the things that I think is important to know this year is that there is actual poll monitor training about these kind of unusual circumstances, so that they are trained. The Board of Elections are just as alert and worried about this as we are. And the goal is for us all to figure out how to get through this and do this in a way where we have a successful election day. Now, this is the part I'm mostly handing over to Camille, the election administration expert.
Mm-hmm. All right. So just a couple quick things. Poll workers are also known as precinct election officials. Depending on what county you're going to be working on, you may have so counties have different voting systems. I think there's something like 8 or 12 different types of voting machines, and there's 2 basic kinds. They're going to be a touch screen, or there may be an optical scan where you actually fill in the bubbles. So it just sort of depends on your county, and you may just want to check. If you're curious and you want us to let you know, we can certainly do that as well. And then provisional ballots, those are, as we mentioned, they're paper ballots. They just have to be verified by the Board of Elections because there's something that they need to verify. So it could be, the person may not have registered, or they may have moved, or they didn't have the right ID. Those are types of situations where someone would be asked to vote a provisional ballot. So we're going to get into a couple more frequently asked questions. So on Election Day, I guarantee you, if you are pleasant and you elicit voters to come up to you, someone will walk up to you and say, I just went inside and they told me I'm not on the list, I'm not registered. Can you help? So basically you would check their registration and make sure they're at the right polling location. And this is the link to the Secretary of State's page. It's just a shortcut link because if you are checking from your phone, it can be troublesome trying to find the exact link. So this is just a quick link. And if you don't have phones and you want to check someone's registration, you can just say, just hold on, let me just call this number. You can call the hotline, call the command center, and we can find you their registration lookup. And then there are 3 possibilities that can happen, and we'll go through each slide. So the first one is the person is registered, and turns out they're also in the right location. Yay! So you show your shoulder and say, huh, I don't know what's going on. But if you'd like me to go with you, we can go back inside the polling location and we can show them this registration that I have on my phone, or we can, you can offer to talk to the polling location manager about, why this person's registration may not show up. They may not show up. It could be they just quickly overlook the person's name. That happens where you just miss it, or you may have misheard, the poll worker may have misheard the person's name and didn't find it. Maybe there's this glitch with their poll book, the electronic poll books. Some counties are going to be using electronic poll books, and back in Hamilton County in the last election, some of the poll books weren't working in the beginning of the day. And so they weren't able to find voters. And they actually, every polling place should have a backup paper poll book. So if you are in a situation where the same thing happens, you can request that they start using the paper poll book. That's what you would want to do, and the paper poll book should have them. Now, if for some reason they're still not on their paper poll book, maybe there's a page missing, who knows? That's something, again, you would call us in the command center, so we'd have a record of it and we'd work to get it fixed with the Board of Elections. Okay, so the second possibility of someone, you look up their registration, turns out you see they're on the screen, that means they're registered, but you say, hey, is this your current address? And they say, oh no, I moved, I don't live there anymore. So the key there is you can reassure them, don't worry, you can still vote. It doesn't mean you can't vote. You're registered to vote in Ohio, so you can vote here. We just need to figure out where your new polling location is. And we can do that really quickly by either looking them up on gettothepolls.com or by calling the hotline number, and we can find your polling location. And again, the person may say, oh, but I'm here, this is where I used to vote. No, it's your name is not going to be on the polling book. So you'd have to vote provisionally, even if your name wasn't on the poll book. But it's also a violation of federal law of a felony to do that. So you don't want to attest that you're voting at a location where you don't reside. So again, encourage them to find their new polling location. Okay, and then the third and final option that could happen, you look up the person's registration and nothing pops up at all.
And actually, this is one that's hard. Sometimes you'll have, this happened to me the other day at the Election Protection Hotline. Somebody called, and they were registered in Pennsylvania, and they thought, oh, well, that I'm registered, that should be fine. The problem is, of course, it's one thing if you were registered in Ohio, you can then vote a provisional in another area of Ohio. But if you're registered in Pennsylvania, there's nothing that we can do. Now, you can cast a provisional ballot. Anybody can cast a provisional ballot even if they're not registered, but it will not count, and that's hard for voters. However, it does register the voter for the next election, and that is actually important because, of course, if you didn't remember to register for this election, it could actually happen again. So I would encourage somebody who's not registered to say, I know I'm not registered. I would like to cast a provisional ballot. I know it won't count, but I'd actually like to engage in the civic activity, and I want to get myself ready for next time.
So yeah, I think a good point is when you fill out that provisional ballot, you are asked to provide, if you have a former address, you write your former address, and then you write your current address, and that act will update your registration for the next time. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention is this, we talked about the purge. So again, purge voters will not show up as registered, but that doesn't mean they can't vote. In fact, the Secretary of State had said people who've been purged since 2011 are entitled to vote. they must vote provisionally, and so those ballots should count. So again, if you have a purge voter, you can't find their registration, and you won't know if it's a purge voter or they were just never registered.
Right, yes.
So the advice is still the same. Just look them up based on their new address, their current address, and direct them to go to that polling location.
And to look them up, it's gettothepolls.com. I actually think that site is really useful. Gettothepolls.com.
So again, we're going to hit up some frequently asked questions. Voters are going to election day are going to walk up to you and they may have a question about, hey, what type of ID do I need? I heard I need a driver's license, but turns out I have a Texas driver's license. I just moved here last month. So how do I vote, Catherine?
Well, you can use a utility bill. You can use a pay stub.
Oh, okay. I've got one of those. Another question, does my address on my ID need to match? Now, I know you may think, I thought we covered this, but
we did, but
this is important
because
this happens all the time. It will happen to you several times during your shift. Your address on your Ohio driver's license does not need to match. And even though this has been the rule on the books for years, poll workers every year they try to train them on this every single time, but it still evades many people. So it's important to just remember that it does not need to match. And what about an expired ID? Some seniors may have an ID, but it was expired because they don't drive anymore.
Unfortunately, expired IDs do not work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, but that's okay. You can encourage them to go back and get a utility bill. Now, I will say this. Again, if somebody doesn't have the right ID, you want to make an assessment. You want to have a conversation with them and say, well, do you have a chance to run back home and get it? If they say, yeah, it's no big deal, that's preferable because that entitles them to vote a regular ballot. If they say, I really don't, I'm in a rush, or it's getting late in the day, you want to have them go ahead and vote a provisional ballot. And on the provisional ballot, you just need to give the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. So you don't need to worry about a utility bill or a driver's license. The provisional ballot should catch everyone. So if there's no way for them to go back, or it's too late, encourage them to go ahead and vote provisionally. So this is just a rundown of the basic ID. So as you see, there's a number of forms of ID you can use to vote on election day. The driver's license is probably the most popular ID that's shown. It could be another government ID, a utility bill, a military ID, a bank statement, a government check, or a paycheck. Now, everything else besides basically the driver's license or the military ID, all those other forms have to have your current address on it. So that's the only thing to know about the other forms of ID.
And when they say current, it means in the past year.
Yes. So here's another slide about Mickey Mouse. He's got his ID. It's got an old address on it. Well, that's okay, Mickey. You can still vote as long as it's not expired. This is just another slide to hammer home the ID issues. If you don't have ID, you can use your last 4 digits of your social or your Ohio driver's license. You cannot use another state's driver's license. It just doesn't work here in Ohio. Another frequently asked question. I couldn't vote. The machines are broken. Sometimes if the machines are breaking down, and I will say the machines are very, very old, so it could be...
That's so sad because they're very young compared to us. But, anytime a computer is more than 10 years old, of course, they're liable to break. And they're liable to have some problems. And so it would not be surprising at all. In fact, one of the things I've worried the most about for this cycle is in fact the voting machines, that we would have problems with the actual machines. So do not be surprised. Now, there is always supposed to be a backup paper ballot. Not a provisional ballot, but a backup paper ballot that can be given to voters. The problem is sometimes the poll workers just forget.
Yeah, they could be so panicked about the machines breaking down that they're not focusing on, let's just do this temporary solution. What they're supposed to do is they should contact the board, the board should send some technician to come fix the machines. In the meantime, if lines are forming, they can pass out paper ballots while they're waiting for the machines to be fixed. So if you're seeing lines forming, you can, have a voter take you inside the polls and say, hey, I know you're busy, things are crazy, I'm sure you've got help is on the way, just going to confirm that. But while our help is on the way, can you go and find the paper ballots, and maybe we can help get the line a little shorter that way. Questions about assistance. Again, I'm disabled, can I get help? Yes, if the voting location is not accessible, report it to the command center and make sure that curbside voting is being offered.
My mom doesn't actually speak English. Can I actually help her, please?
Sure, you can help her. You can just go in and talk to the poll worker and let her know that your mom needs assistance. And it should be no issue. If she does have an issue with it, you can come back out and we can talk her through it, or call the Board of Elections and allow that to go through.
And the other thing is, if you do not have somebody with you, the poll workers will in fact help you. They generally do it as a Noah's Ark style, with a Democrat and a Republican providing assistance.
So some common questions about electioneering. So Catherine mentioned there's a buffer zone. There's an election-free zone 100 feet from the polling place. Anybody outside that 100 feet mark with the flags is allowed to pass out whatever it is that they want to pass out. So it's very common that Democrats or Republicans...
Do you want my slate card, Camille?
No, thanks. I already made my decision, Catherine. But there will be all kinds of campaigning going on, most likely at your polling locations. Some people get antsy about that and don't like it. Well, it's just one day. Those are the rules.
And I've often used this is the free speech zone.
Yeah.
That here you have you have your voter buffer, the voting buffer, so that you have a space there where you can think about going in to vote, and you have space to think. But there's an area out here that's the free speech zone where we all have an opportunity to support the candidate of our choice.
Now, I will say sometimes you may encounter, you may have a polling location, say a church, and the church says, we don't allow yard signs on our property. This is private property.
Wow. What happens then?
Call the command center. You could offer to try to talk to the voting location manager, or you can call the command center if that doesn't work. It's election day, and even if it is private property, for that day you've opened it up for voting, and that means opening up for regular campaigning, which includes yard signs outside the flags.
So, Camille, can I wear this political button of my candidate of my choice into the polling location?
Well, you know what? You can wear your button over here in this free speech zone, but if you decide to go inside, we're going to have you take the button off.
Can I wear my election protection T-shirt into the polling location?
Yes, absolutely. The next Election Protection is a nonpartisan organization. It's not advocating for any candidate or campaign, so it's not really campaigning or electioneering. So that should be perfectly fine to go into the polling location. You don't need to worry about covering that up. Now, if you do have your I love Trump, I love Hillary, I love whoever shirt.
I'm all about the auditor myself.
If you have your I love the auditor shirt, or so a voter has that, most likely the poll workers will tell them. You can give them the heads up and say, hey, just so you know, they're probably going to ask you to take that off before you go in there. If you can find a sweatshirt or a sweater, turn it inside out, that will probably be flagged. So.
And you might be really careful, because they might think it's because you don't like the candidate they're wearing, and you can say, oh, it's for all of us. We can't, we can't wear electioneering outfits. We can't support candidates inside. It's this free space for voting. It's devoted to voting.
Oh, and one other piece. So sometimes people wonder about their sample ballot lit.
Oh yeah.
You can take that into the polling place to help you vote. Even though it is in the buffer zone, your political lit to help you vote is totally okay to bring inside.
So the other thing I think is important is when we think about poll monitors, it's how do you actually watch the polls? Well, really, what you're doing is you're engaging with voters, you're assisting with voters, and trying to understand what's going on. But we do have poll monitors staying outside of the polling boundaries. So as a poll monitor, we're in that free speech zone, a little bit of a distance, so the voters, in fact, have space to think through what they're doing in their voting. So you would be looking for these flags to suggest, oh, hey, here are some flags. I can't go past this. And that's the other thing, is to watch and make sure that other folks that are handing out slate cards or whatever are not getting into the voting zone. I had a situation in 2012 where somebody with basically a picture of a fetus was going in and out of the voting zone, and just really said, it's really important to stay out here. Talk to the location manager, the poll workers, to say, hey, this is going on, and they were able to talk to him, and he was really respectful after that.
And so if for some reason your polling location does start developing a long line, the zone moves a little bit so that you can't contact anyone 10 feet of that line, wherever that line stops. Hopefully you guys don't have long lines.
But if you do, who do you call? 866 our vote. All right, I think we've pretty much have covered this. So what are challenges, Camille?
So challenges are a process where on election day only a poll worker can do this. A challenge, a poll worker may say, "Oh, Catherine, I don't know. You look pretty young. I'm not sure you're 18."
Well, I'm a sweet young thing, but I am of age.
Or they may say, "Actually, I know you, and you moved. You don't vote here." Mm-hmm. Or they may say, "You're actually not a citizen." There could be a number of reasons why a poll worker might challenge a voter. We certainly hope that any challenges are limited. It's something that we would want to know about immediately, because it's just really not sort of a standard thing that happens.
So one of the things that we do know from answering phone calls at the Election Protection Hotline is that some of the voters have been challenged on their signature. And this is not something that we've really seen in the past. This is not common, but this may be something that poll workers are more aware of. So that's the kind of thing that we would need to know right away, that people are being challenged on their signature. Camille, does the signature have to be absolutely perfectly the same as last time?
It should not be. It should be what they call an acceptable match. So basically, there's not really hard and fast guidance on this. It's just, right, if you look at it, does it look reasonable? Mm-hmm. And if one poll worker doesn't think that it looks like a match, they should be able to pull over the other poll workers, and they should get a consensus on whether they think that it's an appropriate match.
Do I still have the right to vote even if I've been challenged?
Yeah, so even if you are having a rough time in the polling location, every voter has the right to vote a provisional ballot. One of the things you might try to work into your spiel, if you get to talk to somebody before they go into the polling place, is you could say, let them know, hey, if you run into any problems, just come back out, and I can try to, walk you through it before you vote provisionally. Mm-hmm. And that way you can try to catch it, because it may be a situation where they don't have to vote provisionally, that there's some sort of intervention that we can do to help so they get a regular ballot.
Ooh, let's practice. This is a little hard on webinars. All right, I will ask you questions, Camille. The poll workers say I'm not on the list here, and I used to live in another precinct just nearby in this county. What should I do? Well, let's stop and find this poll monitor here, and we can grab her cell phone and look up her registration. And yes, it turns out you are not registered here. We should find your polling location at gettothepolls.com. My wallet was stolen. The only ID I have with me is my utility bill. Can I vote? Sure, we can use your utility bill as long as it has your current address on it. That should work. I was worried because it was my cell phone. Your cell phone bill works. That's a great one to use. My mom doesn't speak English well. Can I help her vote? Absolutely. Feel free to go help her. Just let the poll worker know that you may be giving your mom some assistance. Is this going to be a problem? I have my vote for Trump's shirt on. Well, it's not a problem over here in this
election protection, First Amendment zone,
Free speech zone.
But if you are going to go inside to vote, you were going to have to take it off or turn it inside down or put a sweater over it.
What about my hat?
So, I think we should also probably take that hat off too.
So now for some of you, you are not just thinking about being a poll monitor on election day, you're also thinking about being an election observer. So this is actually, I think, fairly sad. You may be very well aware of Jimmy Carter Center down in Georgia. They do some really amazing things with poll observation and like looking at elections in foreign countries because of their emerging democracies, or they've had some problems making sure that all the votes were counted, and so the Carter Center goes off and they will go, for example, to Tunisia, an emerging democracy, and see how election day works and if everybody's having access to the polls and how that whole process works. And then afterwards they put together a book on how the whole process works. This year, the Carter Center is working with the League of Women Voters to collect information from observers about how the election went. And so they're looking at all sorts of things, like all of the different things that we really have identified, but mostly they're concerned about whether there are going to be problems at the polls this time because, of course, as you know, all of the conversations about a rigged election has made a lot of people very anxious. Now, for those of you who are on this that are observers, what you're going to want to do is to make notes on the paper form throughout the day. And you might say, wait a second, I don't know about this paper form. It will be in the mail to you. And it's pretty simple. If you wanted to actually look at it, quickly kind of mark down this bit.ly 2016 Observer, and you can actually see the whole form. It looks at everything from accessibility, like we talked about, to any voter intimidation that might be going on. And for this, what the person is doing is looking and marking things down. Unlike the poll monitor that's all about, hey, let's fix the problem, an observer is keeping track of everything that actually happened. And so one of the things that's nice about this program this year is that you can, in fact, be both an observer and a poll monitor. And the hope with this important, this important project, they're calling it a pilot project, is, there's all this worry that, in fact, the election administration isn't fair and that sometimes fraud is going on. And what the Carter Center wants to do is to show what actually happens in Ohio. We are, the swingingest of swing states. We're a bellwether state. And to show that, in fact, what actually happens on election day. And we all know that we have bipartisan election administration, and we know all of the different things that make a difference, like the good auditing procedures following the election. And there are a variety of different ways that our elections are a problem, for example, gerrymandering, but that in fact our election administration works pretty well. Camille, do you have something you wanted to add about this?
Just again, that only one form is going to be submitted per location. So if you are pairing up with someone, that's okay. You just need to submit the one form. And we'll have a way to do it online, or you can submit them back to us in the mail.
And your contact person for this is Carrie Davis from the League of Women Voters. So we'll have information, you probably already have this, but Carrie is at 614-469-1505. And I really appreciate those of you who are taking the time to shall we say, be scientists on election day as well as poll monitors. And so a big thank you to anyone who's participating in this project. All right, so we are at 866 our votes, and this is just the wrap-up, really. Our goal is to ensure that every eligible voter can cast a ballot and that that ballot actually counts. Once again, we're nonpartisan. We want you to be friendly, and when in doubt, call 866 our vote. I'm going to sneeze.
All right, so that does it for our slides. I want to make sure we have plenty of time to go through questions. I'm just going to try to find a way to, let's see, view the questions. If there are any questions, if you have questions, you can submit them via text, via chat, or the questions box. And I'm also going to see if I can find a way to unmute anyone who's on the line who wants to ask a question. Just bear with me.
So what kind of questions have you got?
Okay, so opening the questions.
Thanks everybody for your patience.
So the first question I'm seeing, if a poll worker asks whether they are with an organization, what do you say? You can say you're a nonpartisan volunteer with election protection. I'm still not sure where out there is in reference to the polls. So hopefully we clear this up. The out there is outside of the flags, outside of the 100-foot line where the free speech zone is. That's where you would be standing. Now, if a voter has a question and would like assistance and would like you to take them into the polls to help resolve an issue with a poll worker, they can invite you to do so to go into the polling place.
And Darcy says she remembers Julie McCoy. Hey, Darcy.
Is there an operational definition of voter intimidation? So Catherine had a funny thing that she said at our training. You said, "Oh, it's like porn."
Yeah, it's like porn. You know it when you see it.
Yeah.
So it's difficult because, of course, you as a poll monitor are out there saying hello and greeting voters, and so you could be another person who's just standing there and handing out information, and it shouldn't be intimidating. For many of us, it crosses a line when somebody's glaring, when somebody's shouting, but I suspect you will know pretty clearly if a voter suggests to you in any way that they feel uncomfortable, you will know that the voter considers it intimidation.
Okay, and this question says, my driver's license is from New York, but I registered to vote in Ohio some time ago. Do I vote with a provisional ballot? So this happens a lot with students who are, here, for instance, at Ohio State, and they are just here for 4 years, but they have plans to go back home, or their car is registered back home. They don't need to update their driver's license to Ohio in order to vote here in Ohio. You would just urge them to then use another form of ID, like a utility bill or a cell phone bill or a paycheck, government ID, that kind of thing.
So one of the things that is nice, the universities in many cases in Ohio are giving zero balance utility bills for kids that live in the dorms, and that will function as ID.
Yeah. And also we've been encouraging people heavily to use the early voting, in-person early voting, where you don't have that issue. You can vote with the last four of your social and you'll get a regular ballot. So the ID is easier if you vote early. And there's still time to do that before now and Monday.
This is Deborah want to know.
If someone has moved, they won't be on the rolls at the new polling station. Will they need a provisional ballot? So yes, Deborah, if someone's moved and they haven't updated their registration in time, they should find their new polling location. They'd fill out a provisional ballot and a change of address form that's in that provisional ballot, and that will update their address for the next election, and assuming all the information is correct on the envelope, it will count. If they requested a vote by mail ballot, can they decide instead to vote in person? So sometimes this happens, particularly with elderly people or people who are not used to the vote by mail. This year, the Secretary of State sent out applications to all, quote unquote, all registered voters.
A vast majority.
The vast majority received an application. And so people who received the application and submitted it back to the Board of Elections are on record as requesting absentee. And so if they attempt to vote on Election Day, they will be voting provisionally. Jeffrey wants to know, does each polling location have an inside poll monitor, one from each party? So that's a great question. So inside the polling locations, many of them, particularly in urban counties, will have what they call observers. And those are credentialed volunteers who are there by a party, a political party or a campaign to observe. And those people can only literally watch. They cannot interact with voters. They can politely and discreetly pull a poll worker aside and whisper in their ear if there's something that they're concerned about. But they cannot actually, if a voter is having an issue right there in front of them, they can only observe. They cannot help that voter. And that's kind of where we saw our
yes, that's
our
where
programs overlap.
Yes.
In that they can be our eyes and ears on the inside, but we can actually help voters on the outside who've had problems or who feel as though they could like some extra assistance. We can actually go with them into the polls.
And don't be surprised if an observer from inside comes out and says, "Hey, this is what I'm actually seeing.
Yes.
I'm hoping you'll do something about it."
Question from Andres: can voters legally bring firearms into the voting location? So I think that.
So this is an open. So we are an open carry state. However, most locations actually have a prohibition. So, like if you're a church or you're a school, there are rules against firearms. So that's actually one of the things that's good. But for example, there's a polling location, for example, at there's a golf course nearby. I noticed that. Yeah, or a union. One of the things that'll happen is if they put on the door that no guns are permitted, that is a prohibition, and they are not permitted. Period. So I think in most cases inside, guns are not permitted.
So is someone displaying a gun enough to report to the voter location manager? I would, if you saw a gun, I think that's something that it's smart to report that to the voting location manager. It's better to know that. It's certainly something that the voting location manager can then decide how to escalate it and who is going to get involved in that point. He may be able to politely ask them to leave or to go, to take it back into their car. But that's not something that we would want you to actually intervene with. You would just want to talk to the voting location manager, I think.
And I think for many of us, just seeing somebody having a gun would be anxiety-provoking. And so letting that location manager know what's going on is really important.
Darcy says, I don't have a smartphone, only a dumb cell phone that really makes phone calls. Can I still be useful? Absolutely. You can be useful by being our eyes and ears and calling into the hotline, and we will be able to assist you. It would be just as any other voter who's calling the hotline with a voter question. You're just there instantly being like, 1 second, this is only going to take 1 minute to find, and we can get you on your way. So absolutely, Darcy, don't worry about that. Do out-of-state IDs work?
No, out-of-state IDs do not work as identification.
Right.
I've lost sound. Are you still speaking? Dear Lord.
I hope
that's not the next one.
That's not a problem. If a person has moved to another address within the past year, is a valid Ohio driver's license with the old address acceptable? Doesn't the voter have to vote at the precinct corresponding to her current address? Yes and yes. So if you've moved within the last year or the last 3 years and you still have your old driver's license, that's fine as long as the driver's license is not expired. And you would find the voters precinct according to where they now live.
Yeah, your polling location is based on your current address, but your old Ohio driver's license is perfectly, that the address is perfectly fine. A wrong address is perfectly fine.
Will there be a link for the slide deck? Yes, we will send out the slide after probably tomorrow, and as well as for anyone, I know this we're going to make it available on demand for people to watch or listen.
So will we be stationed outside the perimeter or inside?
We will be outside the perimeter.
However, if a voter asks for help, you can accompany the voter in. Also, at the beginning of the day, you want to go inside and tell the poll workers that you're actually out there, just in case they need any assistance. And also, it makes them feel more comfortable about who's outside.
How is the 100-foot zone defined? Is it 100 feet from the entrance, or is there a 100-foot circle around the entire location?
It is a semicircle.
If we are to stay outside, how do we contact the poll manager?
Well, clearly, if something comes up, you will need to walk inside and tell the poll manager. So, you know, clearly, there are a couple different reasons to go inside. One, to tell them, in fact, you know, that you're here. Mm-hmm. Two, problem outside, it's worth going inside and telling the manager or a poll worker what's going on so that they know. And three, you may see
earlier, you know, at the beginning of your shift, when you check in, you can just say, hey, it's Catherine. I'm going to be outside. I'm taking over for this shift. I'll be outside till the close of polls. You know, I'm just helping voters. Mm-hmm. If you have a question that you know you can't figure out what to do, you can let us know because we have some resources too that can help. And you know, usually that's greeted warmly. Are we supposed to tell voters they can't wear their partisan T-shirts into the polls, or is that the poll worker's job? So, I mean, if you see someone, you can say, hey, you know, you can say that, you know, you may want to take that off because you may save them the steps, right? Like if
it's true. No, it's true.
If you see the person coming and you can get to them, I would say, you know, you may have to take that off. They're going to probably ask you to take it off, and that will save them the steps if it's a shirt or something that they need to find.
It's also a way to engage in a conversation because in a lot of ways, what can be hard is that you want to engage people in a conversation to know that you're there to help. Mm-hmm. But of course, you know, if somebody says, well, you're wrong and I want to wear this T-shirt and I'm going in, well, then it is in fact up to the poll workers to tell the person with the shirt or the hat or the pin that in fact they need to remove them or cover them up.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to be the police to enforce it, but it's helpful to give them the heads up. Can a person have a driver's license and not be a citizen? How do you detect citizenship? So a person could have a driver's license and not be a citizen. Everyone who is a registered voter has affirmed that they are a citizen. So really, it's going to be one of those questionable challenges because for most cases, you cannot imagine a situation where a poll worker would have some sort of knowledge that would make them say, aha, you're not a citizen. So what would likely be happening if you do get that situation is probably some sort of prejudice, discrimination happening. And again, that's something you'd want to tell us about because we want to make a record of that. Are the poll workers who make challenges reps of parties and candidates? So yeah, poll workers it's supposed to be divided by Democrats and Republicans. So so you could get a situation where, you know, two poll workers are challenging and then two other poll workers say no, you know, for instance, the signature match, that's a fine signature. And two other ones say, nope, it's not an exact match, and they'd have to sort that out between themselves. And they'd have to sort out that challenge. And again, in that situation, if they couldn't reconcile it, then that person could at the very least vote a provisional ballot. You guys are doing great with this webinar. Very entertaining. Thank you, Darcy. Okay. Back in 2008, partisan poll monitors had to be lawyers. Are we allowed in the polling place? Are those still allowed? So again, you can only be in the polling place if you have been invited as a poll monitor. If you've been invited by a voter who needs assistance, the people who are in the polling places observing have a credential.
Yes, since 2008, they've actually made some changes about this so that the partisan observers can no longer speak to the voters. So that's one of the biggest changes since 2008. And that was supposed to make it so that the voters were not intimidated and that the arguments were between, shall we say, among the poll workers and the observers rather than impacting the voters.
Will there be something written down for us? Of course, we will summarize all the main instructions and your contact information. We'll send you the links for the webinars. We'll send you the handouts. We'll make sure you get all of the materials so that you're organized and ready for Election Day. And most importantly, your assignment.
Yes, and this is Kay, who's coming all the way from California to help us.
Okay, great. Thanks for coming, Kay. As an observer, can I wear my League of Women Voters pin?
Please do.
Is the packet with what we need coming in the mail?
So if you are in areas outside of major metropolitans, the packet will come in the mail. If you are in, like, say you're in Columbus, we have a couple different locations where you can pick them up. And it's the same thing in, like, Cleveland and Toledo and Dayton and Akron. There are locations where you can pick up the materials because, of course, it's expensive for us to mail it out to absolutely everybody. So if you're in a city, we're asking you on the Monday before the election to come to your regional command center and pick up the materials. And so we'll send out emails with more information about that. So the materials that are important, I think, are the Know Your Rights cards, which I really like, which gives voters not just, it gives them something that they can take in with them, and which can sometimes make them more comfortable than bringing you in with them.
If there are lots of people in the free speech zone, how do we set up so people can find us if people are coming from several directions? So many of you will have a button or a t-shirt. I think you'll have literature to help sort of flag, but I can understand it can be a little hard to do that, to navigate through the traffic. Some of you, and if you're in a large city, we have yard signs that you can pick up at your command center on Monday, and that can also help to identify.
You may not actually talk to every voter who comes in because, as you might imagine, in like a parking area, voters are coming from different directions, and you may not get a chance to talk to all the voters, and that's fine.
Yeah. Do your best.
Do your best. Wave. Say hello.
Yes. We'll be getting information from the webinar, including phone numbers. That will definitely be included in the instructions. I'm coming from California. How do we dress? In layers. You never know. We just never know what the weather may be.
So this is the most changeable time of year. One of the things that we do know is it's supposed to be pretty nice, and for us, pretty nice is 50s to 60s. It is a good idea to be prepared for the rain.
When we arrive, we need to go to the polling place and identify ourselves to the poll workers. Then we go back outside to the free speech area. Perfect. Yes, that's correct. When and where do we receive our t-shirts and buttons?
Okay, so this is from Kay, who's going to be doing it in Columbus. So you will come to SEIU, which is on Dublin Road, or you'll come to our office, which is downtown in Columbus, and pick up this material.
So here's a good one. Can people take ballot selfies?
I don't know. Can you take ballot selfies?
So I saw something today, and it's terrible. I should remember the source where I saw it, but I was reading something today, and it had a list. I think it was from maybe it was Election Protection.
Right.
It had a list of the states of ballot selfies, and Ohio was on the state where It's fuzzy. You probably won't get in trouble. The most they can do is ask you to stop, but just be careful and be mindful that you're not getting somebody else's voting machine ballot information included.
So actually, I went and I visited the early vote location and actually identified some issues. But while I was there, they were actually encouraging new voters to have their picture taken next to the flag, and they were encouraging voters to take a picture of the voting machines from an angle where you couldn't actually see people's ballots. And I took a bunch of pictures just because I thought it was really interesting how they had set it up. But that whole notion that there's going to be an openness to some pictures, they're not going to want you to catch the ballot.
How will I know who else is volunteering from election protection alongside with me? So many locations, it will just be you. If you want a buddy or have a buddy who will be willing to go, and if you feel more comfortable with a buddy, then you can bring a buddy. But in many times, it will just be you. Because the idea is that we're trying to cover as many problem precincts as possible. What if there's no internet service? Call us, call the hotline, we can help. There have been threats of certain groups showing up to intimidate voters. What do we do if that happens?
So this goes back to my recommendation to, if you are concerned, if there are a bunch of angry-looking people looking menacingly at voters, or making statements or shouting or doing anything that you think is at all problematic, go inside, ask for the location manager, tell the location manager what it is that you saw. At this point, the poll monitors have been trained and they're working with the Board of Elections to address this type of intimidating behavior. So that's your first job. The other job is to encourage the voters to walk with you in quickly. And then last but not least, if you think there is any danger, we want you all to be safe. Get the heck out of Dodge, call 911, and then call us, 866-OUR-VOTE.
I am traveling from another state. When will I be told where to report? So it just depends. We will be following up with people because we're getting a number of signups from multiple places, but we will be following up this weekend with all the instructions and information. And for many of you, it will be on Monday on Monday on election, the day before election, you can go to your center to pick up your materials, and there will be a sign-up sheet to get your assignment.
So the other thing is, for a lot of you, you might have noticed that yesterday, if you were planning on the Cleveland training, there was some baseball game yesterday. For some reason, we have way more people on this training that were from Cleveland. So you have people from all over. So don't be surprised. You will receive something tomorrow. If you don't, give us a phone call. You should have our contact information or send an email.
If you're an observer, will we be paired with a monitor? So if you are observing with the Carter Center, you can bring a buddy. We don't have a buddy necessarily in mind for you, some people are just strictly observing. Some people are wanting to observe, write down fill out the form, but they also want to be helpful with problems that may crop up, and so. So they will be a joint observer/monitor, and some people will just be poll monitors who are just helping with problems.
So this is from Lucas, who's in Mahoning County.
So Lucas, I know you're in Mahoning County. We don't actually have a regional lead in Mahoning. We weren't able to find one. But you, on Election Day, will be reporting to the command center if you have experienced a problem. And I will be following up with others who may be in a similar situation if you're in counties where we don't have field teams, large field team staff. We'll just have you call your problems into the command center, and we'll help you just as a regional lead would help you. Other than sitting outside, how do we identify ourselves to voters?
So this is a question that Steve has. You will have a T-shirt or you'll have a pin, and then I think there's that simple, hello, I'm Steve. I'm here to help voters. I'm with the Election Protection, And do you have any questions or anything you're wondering about today? Or whatever, it seems comfortable. Everybody has a different, shall we say, shtick.
Yes. We heard a number of times about when we should talk to poll workers, but also that we can only enter at the request of a specific voter. Is coming in to talk to a poll worker about a general issue, saying hi with donuts, or alerting someone about intimidating an exception? Yes, I'd say that's an exception.
Absolutely.
We will get top issues FAQ intake forms in the mail? Yes. So we will send out all of those so you have electronic copies, and if you are in areas where there's not a large field team, we will send those in the mail. If you're in the major cities, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, Dayton, Toledo, Akron, you should be able to pick those up on Monday. We'll be giving out instructions based on where you guys are coming this weekend, so stay tuned. How do I get my schedule? I need the information on picking up the materials from my command center. So when you pick up your materials on Monday, you can pick an assignment that works with your schedule and get all the materials you need.
And it seems a little funny to wait until the day before the election, but a lot of times we also get last-minute information that helps us identify the locations that you should be at.
So Amy says, when I take over my observer post at 2:30, will I get a form that was started earlier? No. So you would just fill out the form for your shift. You don't need to worry about what happened in a previous shift. We will just need your information.
And work with Carrie Davis from the League of Women Voters on coordinating that.
And Carol wants to know our PowerPoint. We will be sending those around. Brooke wants to know, should we get involved with an individual causing any voter intimidation, and what would that process be?
So, Brooke, I would really encourage you not to take them on directly. What we don't want to do is to create more of a fight or any additional chaos by trying to stop the intimidation directly. This is why you go in, you tell the location manager about what's going on. I would urge you, like if a voter appears to be intimidated, you can say to the voter, hey, would you like me to walk in with you? And so that's what I would really encourage everyone to do. Focus on the voter, focus on getting the voter into the polls, focus on informing the location manager, and giving us all a phone call.
Earl wants to know, are student IDs acceptable? Sorry, Earl, you cannot use a student ID. We would need a Ohio driver's license or a utility bill or government document. If they don't have any of those forms, they can vote provisionally with the last four of a social. Joe wants to know about the free speech zone. How do we identify ourselves and distinguish ourselves from other political activity?
Joe, when you come and pick up your T-shirt, that will help identify you. I also have suggested, if you're using a clipboard to make your hash marks and everything, you can put the Know Your Rights card, tape them to the back of the clipboard, and that also helps identify why you are there. You're there to help voters and give them information.
Jennifer wants to know, is there a private cause of action under the voter intimidation laws in Ohio? I think so, but I'm not sure. I know we have laws against intimidation. I would just have to double check.
So one of the things that I've really liked about working with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law is that they spend a lot of time trying to think about the best ways to stop intimidation. And this can include a variety of different things.
Anne wants to know, does the utility bill need their name or is the address enough? So Arnie, it needs to be the address and name, and it has to be within the last year. Back in 2008, Gary says partisan poll monitors stood inside the polling place and coached polling place for volunteer workers on how they should apply voter verification rules. Is my memory still correct? No. So as Catherine said, the observers inside the polling location can't actually speak or interact with voters. They could discreetly and sort of, if it's not going to interrupt voting, pull a poll worker aside and a poll working location manager and say, hey, I don't think this is actually quite right. And they can step in that way, but they can't, if a voter's having a dialogue with a poll worker, they can't just come over to the table and say, actually, no, here's what you do, if that makes sense. Is there a site where we can download and review all the information and rules for this presentation?
It's coming to you via email.
If someone doesn't have a valid ID and votes with a provisional ballot, can they provide their ID later? Yes, they can. In most cases, though, the best thing to do would be to just vote with the last four of their social, and they don't need to worry about following up with a driver's license if they didn't have one. If they're casting a provisional ballot because they didn't have ID, just the last four digits will do it and will be enough for it to process. Jill says, my change of address I put in 3 weeks ago didn't show when I went to vote, and they made me vote provisional. Is that right? So if you change your address before the voter registration deadline, which was October 11th, it should have been updated.
Yeah, it should have, depending on whether it was, if it was before, it should have been updated. And it sounds like if that was the case, that's the problem. But if it was afterwards, then no, you would end up voting provisionally.
Yeah.
What is a normal shift? So now, Jeff, a normal shift is whatever it is you want to make of it. Now, we encourage people to kind of pick an early morning kind of shift, a midday shift, an afternoon shift, or an evening shift. Some people are going to work all day. That is not a requirement. Really, what we want people to do is what works best with your life and with your schedule, and in many cases, for some of us, how much our bodies can take.
Bev says, will we get our schedule to observe and location and materials soon? I think I volunteered to observe Sunday, but no confirmation. So, Bev, we will definitely follow up with you by tomorrow with all the information you need for this weekend. Thank you for volunteering. And James, are poll monitors permitted inside where the poll workers are doing their job? No, James, you have to stay outside unless a voter requests your assistance.
Or it's a short-term hello,
Yes.
I'm here, or there's a problem.
Okay, to go in the restroom, Phil? Yes. Feel free to use the restroom. It shouldn't be a problem. David says, still unclear of the guidelines for when someone shows up at the wrong polling place, but has valid Ohio registration. Say they are unable or unwilling to go to the correct polling location. Should we advise them to vote provisionally or not? So someone who shows up at the wrong polling location, you would want to direct them to the correct polling location. If they refuse to go, that's their right. You just may want to inform them that your provisional ballot would need to be in the right precinct for it to count.
So there is a requirement, no matter what, the poll workers give provisional ballots. And if somebody says, oh, this isn't my polling location, but it's close enough, I should get to vote, and they make a stink of it, the poll worker will give them a provisional ballot, but at the end of the day, that vote will not count.
Melissa wants to know. Oh, no, Betsy wants to know. Did we do this one?
I don't know.
Betsy, could poll workers ask voters for their driver's license, implying that it's the only acceptable form of ID? So poll workers tend to do that. They tend to suggest that the driver's license is what they should get. But there's, if a person doesn't have it, obviously they can provide other forms of ID, like their utility bill. So, if a voter comes back and tells you, they told me I had to vote with my driver's license, but I left it at home, you could say, if you'd like me, I can go in and remind them that other forms of ID are acceptable.
Now, one of the things Melissa asked is whether poll workers know about this type of volunteer program. Are they going to expect you or be confused by this? So the Election Protection Program has been around for a long time. I first started doing this Election Protection Program in 2004, got really active in 2012. So it's very well known, but that doesn't doesn't, of course, mean that all poll workers are going to know about this nonpartisan program. So some may be surprised, but I suspect they're not going to be surprised that in the swingiest of swing states that there are people that are focusing on making sure that every vote counts. So just let them know that you're nonpartisan and that you're here to help.
So David wants to know, how do you feel about taking photos or videos of someone intimidating a voter? I would suggest not doing that. I think that might escalate things and might just, I think the best thing to do would be to just go into the polling location if it's safe and let the voting location manager know. One of the things that we're hearing is some other groups are encouraging people to take live streaming video and pictures of these suspicious activities that are happening, and that may actually make people feel more on alert and have an intimidating factor in it of itself.
Well, and it may also escalate it.
Right.
Who are you to take my picture?
Yeah.
What are you doing over there?
Linda asked if there's no internet service again. Just call the hotline. We can look it up. Darcy, I don't know how or where to get a T-shirt since I didn't attend the in-person training. So if you are in, if there's a field program in, the major urban areas, there will be a Monday night pickup for you to get that. Otherwise, you should be expecting a button in the mail. Polling location assignments, again, those will be given out if you have a regional command center in an urban area.
Yeah, so Steve will be up in Toledo. Okay. So Toledo, that's George. George will work with you on finding the location you're going to be at.
Same thing, Ida wants to know about getting materials. I think Ida is in Columbus, is coming to Columbus, and so we'll have a Monday pickup option for Columbus folks.
And we'll have 2 different locations for that if you're in Columbus.
Yeah, and so we'll have instructions based on your region. If we hear one of the partisan monitors inside is challenging voters or asking for ID, we should call. Yes, please call.
Call right away. Do not stop.
Losing sound. Sound is not working.
Oh,
Can't
no.
hear you. Oh, no. Sound is breaking up. Your mic is on the fritz.
Are we the only ones left?
Okay. Don't think I'm officially signed up. Tech problems when I tried to sign up a couple days. Please help.
All right, David, we'll make sure that we contact you. Can poll workers object to our presence outside the perimeter and ask us to leave? No, if you're outside the perimeter, that's the free speech perimeter where you are permitted to be. They can, of course, object to if you are just walking in and out and in and out. But if you've come to help a voter, they cannot object to that because the voter is permitted to have the person assist them of their choice.
David, what if the hat or T-shirt does not identify a candidate but is a phrase associated, like "Make America Great"? I think that's something that would be considered partisan, and they ask you to take that off.
I agree.
If someone goes in with partisan clothing and the poll workers don't send them out, should we call the hotline? Yeah, you can call the hotline. We can tell them to be more mindful of that.
Sounds like a plan.
Would you please repeat whether it's a 100-foot zone is a full circle or just a semicircle?
It's a semicircle.
You seem to be using poll observer and poll worker to mean the same thing. True. So in my mind, there are 3 different things. The poll workers are the people who are working the elections. They're paid by the Board of Elections to, check in voters, help them vote, etc. A poll observer is someone who's credentialed by a party or a candidate to monitor the elections inside the polling place. They cannot assist voters. And then the poll monitor is who we are talking to now, you guys on the phone, who will be outside of the polling location past the 100-foot marker, helping voters with polling place registration problems.
And then the Carter observers, which is where the observer becomes a little confusing, they are there basically paying attention to what is exactly happening and marking everything down.
And they're outside too,
yes,
just
they
where
are.
The poll monitors would be. So that's how you could be a poll monitor and observer at the same time, because you're there to either help voters or you're there to observe voters and let us know how the polling places are working, or you're there to do both.
And David, you are permitted to go inside briefly to say hello or to alert them to problems, and if a voter asks you to accompany them. And you can always stop in if you need to use the bathroom.
So we'll have T-shirts in our major urban areas available for Monday pickup. If you live in Cincinnati, the pickup is going to be at Hebrew Union College on Monday. I believe the hours are from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. We will send you the instructions for where exactly at Hebrew Union College in Clifton. If I am approached by a member of the press, what should I say or do? Well, that's a good question.
That is a good question. So this is what we encourage you to do, to say that you are a nonpartisan volunteer and to encourage them to call the regional hotline. We may call you back and ask if you're comfortable talking to that reporter, but check in with us first.
Jill wants to know, are people allowed to yell and protest at people in the free speech zone?
Yep. As long as it's not intimidating, which is where it's very hard to actually identify where the line crosses. If you're not sure somebody's crossed the line, so for example, you could be yelling, I'm a Dem, I'm a Dem, I'm a Dem. That's not necessarily intimidating, or right. Go vote, fight, whatever. Whatever.
Make America great.
Whatever it is.
Build the wall.
Whatever it is, that would not necessarily have to be intimidating. It's just somebody sharing their First Amendment rights. But if you start to feel anxious, or any voter suggests that they feel anxious, go in and let the location manager know about the problem.
David, is this the same contact info for volunteers as 800 Our Vote? So this is the 866 Our Vote Election Protection Program. We've partnered with a number of organizations, which may be confusing because you may have gotten multiple signups. Common Cause, the League, the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. We're all working together and the Unity Coalition to strengthen our democracy. So,
and nonpartisan. 866 Our Vote. How do you know if someone else is coming to relieve you or not at the end of your shift? So someone may come, someone may not come. You do not need to wait for them. The goal here is for us to cover to the best of our abilities. And if you are ready to go, you should feel free to leave. And then we have, after we've informed the election leader and called the hotline, should we film intimidation or intimidators on cell phones? I would really encourage you not to do that. You just don't want to escalate the situation.
Does the free speech zone include hate groups? Can I inform election leader if the KKK or other hate group is out there? Yes, please do.
Yeah, the minute you think that this is all intimidating, and it could be as simple as inappropriate garb. If somebody is wearing something that is very racist, I don't know, a little white hat might do it, right? Yes, please let the location manager know as soon as possible, and then let your command center and 866 Our Vote know.
Linda wants to know, what if voters feel intimidated by the observers inside the polling area? Well, they can call us. We can let the voting location manager know. Maybe the observer in there is being a little too aggressive or not respecting people's personal space. So we can try to work that through. Can we pick up materials early on Tuesday? So probably you could probably find someone in the command center if you are in a major field city. Then you could find us in a command center and we'd have materials for you.
Yeah, don't be surprised. So Jennifer's coming in from a nearby state. So of course, if you can't make it that Monday before, do not worry. Come see us on election day and we'll get you all ready. So we also have a question about a shift. You should feel like if, for example, you decide, I'm going to do all day, and you're all committed to doing all day, but then all of a sudden you're like, you know what, I cannot actually make a full day of this. I did 4 hours, that's as much as my body can take, or, oh my gosh, I have a babysitting problem. What you want to do is make a phone call to your local leader, to your regional leader, let them know that you're ending your shift a little bit early, but no guilt, just head on home.
Is an electronic copy of a utility bill acceptable? So no. Unfortunately, no, they will not accept a print off or something on your phone if you wanted to bring that. Most poll workers would expect you to have a paper copy.
So Jeff wants to know if this is a paid job. So sadly, we are all volunteers on this. It's important work to help everybody know that we can vote, and we really appreciate all the volunteers.
Earl says he's traveling from Michigan to Toledo. Can he pick up his materials in the Able office on Toledo? And yes, on Tuesday. Yes, Earl, there will be somebody there in the office on Tuesday.
Thanks for the people who have given us alerts that you can still hear us.
So a poll observer appointed by a Democratic Party cannot challenge. So if you are inside the polling location, only the poll workers themselves can challenge voters. It can't be, an observer who's there credentialed by a party. No.
Oh, and Jacob wanted to throw out that the hours for Cincinnati location for pickup are 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. And is that Hebrew Union?
Yes, Hebrew Union College.
I know Jeff is actually flying into Akron on Monday, and you're going to be able to pick up your information from the regional lead person, who's Tabitha.
Yes. So yeah, we'll give you the instructions so you can hook up with Tabitha. She is going to be up in Akron, so we can definitely make sure you get your materials for Tuesday.
All right, we also, let's see, we got, oh, I missed one. This is my fault for moving it. I apparently am computer challenged, but here we go. Does every single polling place have a polling manager? Yeah, so there's one person who's in charge of making sure everything goes smoothly. That person also will have a counterpart, so there'll be a Dem person and a Republican person. And so it may be that the polling location manager asks to bring over, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, to hear your information together. So don't be surprised by that. What do you see, Camille?
What if voters in the line engage us in conversation? They may be bored or talkative. Can we engage with them? Yes, that's more than, that will make your stay more pleasant.
Yes.
Have fun. Talk with them, share with them. It's just important that you stay nonpartisan in their conversation, that you don't, identify how you're voting, who you're supporting. Just be nonpartisan and polite. Some phones do not have letters on the number key. Please confirm that.
Yes.
866-687-8683. That is the number. Call. That is the command number. Yes. The central office in Akron is going to be at the AFL in Akron. That's where the staging location will be. We will get you information and instructions. So on a couple occasions, apparently we sounded like adults on a Charlie Brown cartoon. Okay. If we see an official asking for voters' photos, IDs inside of a polling location, that's a tell. Then tell the polling location manager and call the hotline. Yes, if someone is just insisting that you must have a photo ID, please call the hotline. Let the voting location manager know that they should be also accepting other forms like a utility bill. Can you go over the driver's license rule again? So if you have an Ohio driver's license and it's non-expired, you can use it to vote. It does not need to have the current address where you live now. It just has to be non-expired.
So Camille, for example, she moved a couple years ago and she has not had to update her driver's license. So it actually has her old address. It functions as ID at her new polling location.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you are using a utility bill or any other form of ID, you really need to have the current address and name on that form.
And that would be the same for a bank statement as well.
Should we get there ahead of our shift start time in order to do the thing, introducing ourselves? I'm worried they'll be super busy and hard to track down. Yeah, of course, especially If you're getting there if you're doing a morning shift and the polls open up at 6:30, we'd recommend that you get there around 6 just to make sure that it looks like it's going to open on time. Most of the problems tend to happen in the morning, and hopefully they smooth themselves out as the day goes. So if you're if you're going to get there a few minutes early, I think that's helpful.
Yeah, I actually think, especially if your first shift starts at 6:30, it's helpful to be there 10 minutes early. And even if all you're saying is, hi, I'm here, you can see whether they're actually going to get started on time. Which, if they're not, then alerting the Board of Elections is important, and letting us know what's going on is important.
Jeff wants to know, where is the Cleveland pickup? It's going to be at the Cleveland NAACP, 16400 Miles Road. We'll give you instructions. Do the driver's license with the old address need to be supported? No, you don't need to have any other form of ID to verify that this is your new address. Just an Ohio current driver's license will work, period.
So are we at the end of our questions?
This one.
Okay,
one more.
Okay.
I am in a rural area. Not much happens out here. Can I be of better help in an urban area? Sure. If you could get to an urban area where we've got field people, then definitely we will just follow up with us and we can get you the information for that field team.
All right, well, any other questions that we didn't hit? Because we are at 7:59, so we have 1 minute left for questions. Well, thank you all so much for participating in this. And no matter what, you should feel free to give a phone call to us. I'm going to give you my cell phone number, which is 614-579-5509. 614-579-5509. Give me a phone call anytime, and if you have any questions.
And this is Camille, and my cell phone is 614-378-3041. Thank you all for attending the webinar. Feel free to follow up. And we'll also, in the instructions, let you know there will be a Monday night session where voters can call, or poll monitors can call in and have any last-minute questions answered. Okay? Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone, and thanks for volunteering.